I was just thinking about this. It is Monday, March 30th, 2026. And I want you to just imagine waking up today. You pour your morning coffee, you grab your phone to scroll a bit, and you find out that the invisible digital vaults holding an entire nation's most sensitive secrets have just been blown wide open.
Right, just totally exposed.
Yeah. And we aren't just talking about, a few leaked emails or a minor database glitch. We are talking about the foundational databases of a sovereign country. And the people who did it, they aren't even hiding.
Terrible.
They're not in the shadows. They're actively bragging about it on social networks. Like, they are holding live public audio broadcasts just to taunt the authorities.
It is the absolute definition of a digital siege playing out in real time. We were looking at a complete breakdown of what we traditionally consider national security. And what's truly alarming to me is how performative it has become.
Performative. Yeah, that's the word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because this isn't a quiet smash and grab. It's a highly choreographed public execution of a state's digital perimeter.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into the explosive aftermath of this mega leak that just dropped, targeting the government of Argentina. It was executed by this highly sophisticated syndicate known as the Chronus Mafia, or Team Chronus.
Right.
But, we aren't just going to read you a boring list of compromised servers. That's not what we do here.
Absolutely not.
We are getting into the raw, real-time reactions. So we have intercepted audio from LiveX spaces. We've got these urgent threat intelligence flashes from Visser Analyzer. We have deeply detailed forensic breakdowns from independent analysts. And, of course, the raw social media interactions from the threat actors themselves.
It's a massive amount of intelligence to sift through.
It really is. And we are going to examine the deafening, almost surreal silence of the government, the absolute panic erupting among regular citizens, and this is the wildest part to me, this bizarre new reality where cyber warfare is essentially live streamed to thousands of people.
Yeah, the paradigm has completely shifted. It's wild.
Yeah.
But, to understand the magnitude of what happened today, we really have to look past the initial shock value of those headlines and look at the anatomy of the attack itself.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this because the sheer scale is staggering. Visser Analyzer, which, for those who don't know, functions essentially as an early warning radar for global cyber threats.
Right. They are constantly monitoring network traffic and dark web chatter.
Exactly. So they sent out this urgent flash today. They detected a coordinated hacking operation of just unprecedented scale. 28 simultaneous breaches on Argentina's government backbone. 28. All happening at once.
Yeah, we need to clarify what a simultaneous breach of this magnitude actually implies technically. Because when people hear that 28 government nodes were compromised at the exact same time, the Hollywood image kicks in.
Oh, totally. Like 28 different hackers in dark hoodies furiously typing away at different targets.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, that kind of manual simultaneous coordination is incredibly rare.
So my mind immediately goes to an Ocean's 11 scenario.
Yeah.
But technically, it's far more likely they found a skeleton key, isn't it?
Yes.
Like some shared API vulnerability or maybe a compromised third-party vendor that all these different government agencies were using at the same time. They find the single point of failure, and then they just automate the extraction across the board.
Precisely. Governments are notorious for operating on these legacy systems that are interconnected in ways they don't even fully map out themselves.
Which is terrifying.
It really is.
Yeah.
They might have a centralized authentication system or like a shared database management tool used by various ministries. And once a syndicate like Chronus compromises that central nervous system, they could just script the attack to execute across all connected nodes simultaneously.
Wow.
So it's less about having a massive army of hackers and more about finding the one structural flaw that holds the entire house of cards together.
And when the cards fell today, they fell hard. The Chronus team dumped their official manifesto on Telegram, claiming over 8 million compromised records.
8 million?
Yeah. And I want to break down exactly what they took, because the breadth of these targets is terrifying. They hit IOMA, which is the social work and health insurance entity for the province of Buenos Aires. That's over 2 million records right there.
So massive.
Then they hit the Ministry of Security of Salta, another 2 million. The Supreme Court of Justice, 40,000 highly sensitive records. The Ministry of Health, over 1 million. And then there's the Cabinet of Ministers, where they exfiltrated 140 gigabytes of data.
We really need to contextualize that 140 gigabytes in the Cabinet of Ministers.
Exactly what I was thinking. Because people hear 140 gigabytes and they think, oh, that's the size of a couple of modern video games on my console. That's not that much data.
Right. But we're talking about text and document data. A single gigabyte of pure text is tens of thousands of pages.
Right.
So 140 gigabytes of internal cabinet communications, policy drafts, private schedules, and internal memos. That is the equivalent of hundreds of physical filing cabinets. It represents years, possibly decades, of the inner workings of the executive branch.
Just sitting there on Telegram. And then there's the central bank data. Now, 45,000 records doesn't sound like a massive number compared to the millions of health records, but the density of that intelligence is explosive.
Oh,
All right.
absolutely.
We are talking about internal financial routing, sovereign debt strategies, perhaps even the SWIFT architecture they use to move money internationally.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, you really have to understand the foundational architecture of a modern state. A government relies on discrete silos of authority and information, right? Justice, health, finance, security. By compromising all of these simultaneously, the Chronus Mafia isn't just stealing data for financial gain. They are achieving absolute systemic dominance. They are proving that the state cannot protect its sick, its criminals, its money, or even its own leaders.
It's a complete dismantling of the illusion of security, and they made sure absolutely everyone knew about it. Like, if you went to the official website for the Argentine city of Catamarca today, you didn't see municipal services.
No, you saw what forensic analysts call digital graffiti.
Yeah. Describe that, because it's wild.
Well, the entire homepage was defaced and replaced with this massive, glaring black banner screaming, "Hacked by Chronus," in bold red text.
Just right there on the government site.
Right there. And it wasn't just a static image either. They coded in these ominous ticking digital counters displaying the exact number of data sets, organizations, and themes they'd compromised. And it was updating in real time.
It's literally psychological warfare. It's like a bank manager walking into the vault, finding it completely empty, and the thieves have left behind a massive neon sign that says, "We own you," complete with a live ticker of how much money they are currently spending.
That's a great analogy. It absolutely is psychological warfare, and it represents a massive shift in how these threat actors operate. I mean, historically, ransomware groups and data extortionists wanted to keep things quiet.
Right, they wanted to pay out.
Exactly. They would lock up a system and send a private encrypted message to the CEO or the government minister saying, "Pay us $10 million or we release this." The leverage was entirely in the silence.
Because once the data is public, the victim has absolutely no incentive to pay.
Precisely. But the Chronus Mafia completely flipped the script today. The goal here is clearly not quiet, clandestine extortion. By putting up a ticking clock on a public website and dumping records immediately, they are publicly demonstrating that the sovereign state is incapable of protecting its citizens.
Yeah.
When you expose 2 million citizen health records and classify banking details at the exact same moment, you are broadcasting to the populace that the state's authority is entirely artificial.
So the bomb has dropped, the perimeter is breached, 8 million records are out there in the wind. You would think the entire world would be stopping to watch a sovereign nation being turned inside out like this.
You'd think so.
I mean, if the digital infrastructure of a G20 nation collapses in a single afternoon, that is a global event.
Right? You would certainly assume so.
But the reality is incredibly stark. It's a complete split-screen experience, depending entirely on where you live. I was looking at the major global news outlets today, the BBC, Reuters, the New York Times, the Guardian.
And what did you see?
Nothing. Absolute deafening silence. There are no front-page headlines about the collapse of Argentina's digital infrastructure. Even in the mainstream English-speaking cybersecurity circles, you have to dig incredibly deep to find a mention of it.
The silence from the global north is profound, and honestly, it highlights a systemic flaw in how the cybersecurity industry evaluates risk.
I have to admit, that part completely baffles me. If 8 million records were simultaneously stolen from the National Health Service in the UK or the Federal Reserve and the Supreme Court in the United States, it would be wall-to-wall 247 coverage.
Oh, absolutely.
News anchors would be panicking on live television. We'd have emergency congressional hearings by noon. Are we just seeing a geographic bias here? Like, does the global media just assume this kind of catastrophic institutional failure is somehow normal for Latin America?
That is exactly the dynamic at play. It's a sociological phenomenon defined in the intelligence community as epistemic injustice.
Epistemic injustice. Okay.
In essence, epistemic injustice occurs when the severity of an event or the validity of a threat is dismissed based entirely on the geography of where it is happening or the identity of the people experiencing it.
Okay, so it's like a neighborhood watch scenario. If a car alarm goes off in a wealthy, heavily gated community, The residents immediately assume a crime is in progress and the police dispatch a unit within minutes.
Right.
But if an alarm goes off in an impoverished neighborhood across town, people just assume it's a faulty wire or normal background noise and they completely ignore it.
That is a perfect analogy for how the global threat and intelligence community treats Latin America. Global analysts in New York or London see 28 government nodes fall in Argentina, and they just write it off as LATAM-specific chaos.
Wow.
They view it through a lens of inherent institutional instability. Because the attack hasn't hit major corporate networks in the global north yet, the way the WannaCry ransomware attack did, or the Colonial Pipeline hack, they simply don't view it as a systemic global threat.
But that is incredibly dangerous, isn't it? If threat actors know that the global cybersecurity apparatus is looking the other way, doesn't Latin America just become a massive live-fire testing ground?
Exactly. The syndicates incubate their malware, test their simultaneous breach capabilities, and refine their psychological warfare tactics in the global south. And by the time they pivot to target the global north, their methods are fully matured, and the defenders are caught completely off guard because they ignored the warning signs.
That's chilling. And while the global media is hitting the snooze button, the local reaction tells a completely different, chaotic story.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at X today, the platform formerly known as Twitter, the Latin American sphere is absolutely exploding. Argentina is ground zero. You have citizens frantically sharing links, panicking, trying to figure out if their medical histories or their banking details are currently circulating on Telegram.
And the panic isn't isolated to Argentina either. The entire regional underground is reacting. Hackers in neighboring countries are actively amplifying the chaos.
Right. There is a Mexican hacker collective known as @HackersOIHack that immediately started reposting the Chronus data dumps. They were explicitly validating the attack, posting that the Chronus Mafia cumplieron su amenaza, meaning they fulfilled their threat.
And that validation from other regional actors is crucial. It acts as a force multiplier for the terror.
How so?
Well, when other established syndicates publicly verify that the data is real and the threat has been executed, it strips away any lingering hope the public might have had that this was just a bluff. It makes it undeniably real.
And you can really see the toll that takes on the everyday citizen. There was a post from a regular user on X today that just stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
They were replying to one of these massive data dump threads, and they asked desperately, can someone tell me what this means for mortals? Is this something that only affects millionaires?
Man, what does this mean for mortals? That perfectly encapsulates the vulnerability of the modern citizen.
It really breaks my heart because you have regular people who don't understand the intricacies of an API vulnerability or 140 gigabyte database exfiltration. They don't know what a SQL injection is.
Right. Nor should they have to.
Exactly. But they know their national security has just failed them. They know the data exists, and they feel entirely powerless to protect themselves.
And in a moment of acute national crisis like that, the social contract dictates that the state steps in. The government is supposed to provide clarity, instructions, and reassurance.
Exactly. You would expect the Argentine government to be shouting from the rooftops. You'd expect the president on national television, the military mobilized, technical advisories being blasted out to every citizen on how to freeze their credit or protect their medical portals.
That would be the responsible reaction.
But instead, they're doing the exact opposite.
They really are. They have initiated a total institutional blackout. The Argentine government's reaction to the March 30th mega leak has been coordinated. Absolute silence.
That's crazy.
No major press conferences addressing the specifics of the Chronus attack. No technical advisories from the Ministry of Health or the Cabinet. At best, a few isolated departments issued identical vague statements denying that any sensitive systems were compromised.
Completely ignoring the fact that the data is literally already publicly available.
Exactly.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Why? I try to put myself in the shoes of a government minister. The data is ticking away on a defaced public website. Millions of your citizens are panicking on social media. Why lie when the evidence is right there in the open? What is the strategic value of denying reality?
It comes down to the mechanics of institutional power and a concept known as institutional normalcy bias.
Okay, explain that.
Well, governments fundamentally rely on the perception of absolute control. Their authority is derived from the public's belief that the state is competent and secure. If a state official walks up to a podium and publicly acknowledges a highly sophisticated, devastating threat from a syndicate like the Chronus Mafia, they are essentially doing two things that are politically fatal.
First, they are admitting gross negligence in their own infrastructure.
Yes, they are admitting that they failed their primary duty to protect the public. But second, and honestly more importantly in the realm of geopolitics, they validate the hackers as recognized adversaries.
Ah, so by treating them as a legitimate threat on national television, you elevate a group of criminals to the level of a sovereign adversary.
Exactly. And there's a perfect historical parallel that illustrates why governments are terrified of engaging with hackers publicly.
Let's hear it.
A few years ago, the Uruguayan Ministry of Defense suffered a breach. Highly sensitive military and defense data was compromised. The Minister of Defense at the time, rather than soberly addressing the vulnerability, decided to hold a press conference to aggressively minimize the attack.
Okay.
He stood in front of the cameras and publicly called the attacker a stupid Russian.
Oh, no, 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 no. You never, ever taunt the person who just proved they have the keys to your house.
It is universally considered a fatal error of hubris in the cybersecurity world. You do not insult a threat actor who has already bypassed your perimeter because you are practically begging them to escalate.
Because they're already in.
Right. If they already breached you once, they left back doors. The moment you insult their intelligence on television, they will dump everything they have just to destroy your career.
It's like a bank manager watching thieves empty the vault on the live security cameras, but instead of calling the police, they just turn off the monitor, tell the tellers to keep smiling, and assure the board of directors that the vault is perfectly secure so the stock price doesn't dip.
That's exactly it.
They are protecting their immediate political image, not the assets.
And that is exactly what Argentina is doing. They're clearly trying to avoid the Uruguayan minister's trap by saying absolutely nothing at all. They believe that if they don't acknowledge the Chronus Mafia, the news cycle will eventually move on. But in doing so, they're creating a massive, highly dangerous intelligence gap.
Because the aggressive secrecy has absolutely nothing to do with network security or incident response. You can't patch a vulnerability by pretending it doesn't exist.
No, you can't.
And when the state entirely abdicates its responsibility to tell the truth, it creates a massive vacuum. The public desperately needs information. What does this mean for mortals? And if the government won't answer that question, someone else will.
Which brings us to the most surreal and arguably the most important aspect of this entire event. Because the official diplomatic and media channels went completely dark, the actual crisis communications, the threat intelligence, and the raw negotiations spilled out onto a lawless public stage.
Right. If the government goes dark, where do people go to find out if their lives have been ruined?
They go to social media. And this is where we have to introduce a fascinating operational shift.
So, cotton.
Right, cotton or social audio intelligence.
Yeah.
For decades, the cyber underground operated almost entirely in text. Hackers communicated through encrypted, untraceable text files on dark web forums like raid forums or breach forums.
Very old school.
Very. It was slow, it was anonymous, and it was entirely hidden from the general public. But recently, there has been a massive transition to the high-visibility environment of live social audio platforms, specifically X Spaces.
And for anyone who hasn't used X Spaces, it's essentially a live drop-in audio chat room on the platform. Anyone can host one, and anyone scrolling past can click a button and listen in live.
And these rooms became the de facto diplomatic channels for the entire crisis. Instead of waiting for a dark web forum post, you had hundreds, sometimes thousands of participants, journalists, independent security professionals, terrified citizens, and lethal threat actors, all sitting in the exact same virtual room, listening to live declarations of digital hostility.
The environment you were describing sounds incredibly chaotic. Like, there was a specific series of these X Spaces running today under the title Bombitas del Gobierno, which translates to government little bombs.
Yes, they were running continuously as the data was dropping. But navigating that chaos requires a very specific type of mediator. And the central figure who emerged to host the most critical of these spaces was a Uruguayan meta-analyst named Alberto Daniel Hill.
Let's talk about Alberto Daniel Hill because he truly becomes the linchpin of this entire narrative. Hill was hosting a live X Space. The title of the room was fairly unassuming. A&D, cybersecurity and insecurity and coffee.
Very casual.
Yeah. He was casually discussing the unfolding events in Argentina with his listeners, and right in the middle of this broadcast, an unprecedented moment occurred.
The official account for the Chronus Mafia, using the handle L0stex and identifying himself as the leader of Chronus, unexpectedly joined the live audio room.
Just to pause and appreciate the magnitude of this. I mean, you have to imagine the head of a major international crime syndicate, right after executing the largest heist in a nation's history, just walking into a public town hall meeting, grabbing the microphone, and casually explaining exactly what he just did.
It is a complete inversion of traditional criminal behavior.
We actually have the translated transcripts of this exact 10-minute live confession, and it is breathtaking. Albert Sticks is speaking directly to Alburo live on the air, and he casually confirms the entire attack. He says, and I quote, "We're going to make the official announcement, which is approximately more than 8 million records of information from over there in Argentina." And then he doesn't just confirm the past, he gives a spoiler for their next attack.
Yeah, that part is wild.
He says, "And for next month," this is a spoiler, "surely more than 8 million will come. Surely more than 10 million.
And this is where Alberto's role as a meta-analyst really shines. He doesn't panic. He presses Albasex on the timeline. He wants to establish the technical reality. Is this just an empty threat for the future, or is the infrastructure already completely compromised? So Alberto asks him point blank.
And what does he say?
Elberstex replies, "Sure, yes, all the systems are already compromised. We already downloaded all the information, and we have everything on hand. So sure, the announcement is just to advise that it's done. They already lost."
They already lost. That phrase gives me absolute chills. It's so casual. And then Elstex goes on to explain exactly how they did it. He tells Alberto that taking down the Argentine systems only took them 5 or 10 minutes because the security was, in his words, really, really bad.
5 to 10 minutes to collapse the digital backbone of a sovereign nation.
Okay, wait. Let's dig into that technically. How is it even possible to breach 28 government nodes in 5 to 10 minutes?
Well, when a threat actor says it took 5 minutes, they usually aren't talking about writing complex zero-day exploits from scratch. They're talking about walking through an unlocked door.
Ah, I see.
It implies that the government's perimeter security was practically non-existent. We're talking about default administrator passwords left on public-facing servers. We are talking about critical databases lacking basic network segmentation, meaning once you get into the lobby, there are no locked doors to the vault. Or, highly likely in this case, a massive failure to patch known vulnerabilities in legacy software. The hackers run a simple automated scanner, find the unpatched server, run a standard exploit, and they are in.
So it wasn't a master heist, it was just pushing on a door that wasn't latched. But that leads me to my biggest question in all of this. I have to push back on the logic here. Why on earth would a criminal mastermind, someone currently holding 8 million highly sensitive records, hop on a public audio stream to confess?
It seems counterintuitive, right?
It seems insane. Doesn't that break every single rule of operational security? I mean, they are essentially handing law enforcement a recorded confession, a voice print, and metadata. What is the strategic value of this highly public performance?
If you view this purely as a traditional clandestine data theft for financial gain, it makes absolutely zero operational sense. It is reckless. But we have to view this through a different framework entirely. Cyberpopulism.
Vulgar popular.
Yes. The Chronus Mafia's goal is not just data exfiltration. The technical hack, the downloading of the 140 gigabytes, is only half of the objective. The other half is the weaponization of public perception.
Okay, so they actively want an audience.
They absolutely require an audience. They are running massive FUD campaigns. FUD: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. By confessing publicly on a platform with thousands of listeners, they bypass the government's media blackout entirely. They force the citizens to watch the sovereign state fail in real time.
Wow. Think about the psychological terror that inflicts. You are sitting in your living room, the government is telling you everything is fine, and then you open an app on your phone and hear the hacker calmly state that your country's security is a joke, that it took them 5 minutes to steal everything, and that the government has already lost.
It's devastating.
It is designed to completely irreparably erode public trust in sovereign institutions.
It's a hostile takeover of the narrative. The state won't tell the truth, so the hackers step into the spotlight and deliver the devastating truth themselves. And by doing so, they make the government look not just incredibly incompetent, but cowardly.
And this breathtaking live confession didn't just expose the catastrophic failures of the Argentine government. It completely rearranged the hierarchy of authority within the digital underground itself. It solidified a phenomenon that independent analysts are calling the Hill effect.
Yes, the Hill effect. The way the entire digital ecosystem reacted to Alberto Daniel Hill becoming the central node of this international crisis is fascinating. You have hacktivists Terrified citizens and top-tier threat actors all suddenly orbiting this one individual from Uruguay.
Let's dive deep into that. Why Hill? Why does he become the undisputed authority in this crisis?
To understand Alberto Hill's rise to prominence, we have to contrast him with the old guard of cybersecurity. There's a significant cultural shift happening here. Analysts spent a lot of time documenting the simultaneous downfall of a figure named Hector Lopez. Lopez represents the traditional, institutional cybersecurity broker. He is the kind of professional who relies on media hype, opaque institutional ties, expensive certifications, and aggressive gatekeeping to maintain his authority.
Yeah, if you looked at Lopez's timeline during the crisis, he was actively arguing with people online. He was relying on his 20-plus years of experience to shut down any criticism of his analysis. And crucially, he kept dismissing the underground hackers as nothing more than social engineers or Layer 8 problems.
Right.
He was essentially saying they weren't real hackers, they were just manipulating people.
Exactly. And we should clarify what he meant by a Layer 8 problem because it's a very specific technical insult.
Right. Because for the listener who hasn't taken a Cisco networking exam recently, break down Layer 8. As I recall, the OSI model, which is the theoretical framework for how computers communicate across a network, only has 7 layers, correct?
That's right.
Starting from the physical cables at Layer 1, up through the network routers, all the way to the application interface at Layer 7.
That is correct. The OSI model stops at Layer 7. So when a network engineer or a cybersecurity professional jokes about a Layer 8 issue, they are talking about the user.
Oh, the human being sitting at the keyboard.
Exactly. It's a derogatory inside joke, meaning that the technical system is perfectly fine, the technology didn't fail, but the human using it was just stupid or gullible enough to give away their password.
So Lopez was publicly insulting the syndicates, saying they didn't have any real technical skill, they just tricked a few government employees.
Yes. But the digital underground, specifically a highly aggressive, decentralized network known as OPFAs, or the supercolos, violently rejected Lopez's institutional arrogance. These groups view figures like Lopez as complicit with the corrupt, incompetent governments they are attacking. They see the old guard as state PR masquerading as security.
And they didn't just disagree with him, they dismantled him. The cybercolos utilized coordinated digital harassment, doxing him, posting his personal information, flooding his networks until his credibility in the space was completely destroyed.
So the old guard is burning down. But that begs the question, why does the underground respect Alberto Hill? Why does the leader of the Chronus Mafia, a syndicate that just humiliated a nation-state, sit down for a polite 10-minute interview with a guy from Uruguay?
It all comes down to a concept defined as transversal authority. Alberto Hill is respected by both the legitimate institutions and the lethal attackers. But he didn't buy that respect with certifications or government contracts. It was forged in a highly traumatic crucible.
That's right.
Back in 2017, Alberto Hill was subjected to a catastrophic failure of the justice system. He actually became the very first person in Uruguay to be sent to prison for a cybercrime.
The event was dubbed Operation Bitcoins by the authorities, and it is a textbook study in forensic absurdity and state overreach.
The details of Operation Bitcoins are just staggering. The police raided Alberto's home, and the search warrant they executed actually had a typo on it. It said Alvaro instead of Alberto.
Unbelievable.
Right. During the raid, they seized standard, entirely legal penetration testing tools and cryptocurrency hardware wallets that he legitimately distributed as part of his business. And based on that alone, they branded him a credit card cloner and an extortionist.
The forensic incompetence was breathtaking. The state accused him of hacking a major medical provider and stealing a massive database in a span of an hour and a half. But Alberto proved that was physically impossible.
Yes. Explain the network logs, because this is the crux of why he is so respected for his technical truth.
Okay, so when you move data across the internet, your internet service provider keeps logs of your network traffic. It measures the exact volume of data leaving your IP address. The state claimed Alberto downloaded and then exfiltrated gigabytes of patient records. But the network traffic logs from his ISP proved conclusively that during that entire time window, his connection had only transferred a total of 150 megabytes of data.
150 megabytes. To put that in perspective, that's like the police accusing you of stealing an entire fleet of commercial semi-trucks. But the toll booth cameras mathematically prove you only drove through the plaza on a Vespa.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
The math literally does not allow for the crime they accused him of.
Exactly. It was mathematically impossible. Yet, despite the undeniable technical evidence proving his innocence, the justice system pushed forward. He was thrown into pretrial detention for 17 months.
17
He
months.
was deprived of essential medical care, subjected to horrific conditions, and completely stripped of his life and career.
He survived 17 months of wrongful imprisonment. And when he finally got out, instead of hiding or giving up, he transformed that profound trauma into advocacy. He became what some call a digital knight.
That horrific experience gave him an unbreakable, rigid ethical framework and profound anti-establishment credibility. The hackers in these syndicates know his story. They know he has suffered immense injustice at the hands of the very state corruption and institutional incompetence they claim to be fighting against.
But crucially, despite his grievances with the state, he never abandoned his rigorous technical standards. He doesn't just agree with the hackers, he relies strictly on verifiable mathematical truth. He doesn't deal in ego, and he doesn't deal in media spin.
He is operating like an impartial UN mediator, but in a lawless digital frontier. The threat actors won't pick up the phone to talk to the presidents of Argentina or Mexico because they know the politicians will just lie to them.
Yeah.
But they will absolutely drop into a live audio space with Alberto because they know his only currency is the undeniable truth.
And we saw this play out in real time during the Argentine crisis. Hacktivist networks, specifically the Brazo Armado, which acts as the armed militant wing of the underground, groups like OpFaze and accounts like @LStexfoc began massively retweeting Alberto's forensic analyses of the attack.
Let's pause on that. The hackers executing the attack were amplifying the independent analyst covering the attack.
Yes. They used his technical truth as ammunition. They recognized the brilliance of his authority. Because Alberto wasn't relying on vague government press releases, he was mapping the attack vectors, proving the vulnerabilities, and exposing the state's lies with undeniable data. When the government said nothing was breached, Alberto produced the cryptographic proof that it was.
The aftermath of the Argentina leak proves a devastating point. Traditional ethical hacking, the kind that is deeply tied to state public relations, NDAs, and institutional gatekeeping, is completely dead in the eyes of the public.
So we are officially in an era where the most reliable, accurate threat intelligence about the collapse of a sovereign nation-state doesn't come from a government press secretary. It doesn't come from a highly paid corporate consultant. It comes directly from the syndicates executing the attack, mediated by an independent survivor of the system broadcasting live on a social audio platform for anyone to hear.
It is a profound realization. We have watched the complete, undeniable erosion of traditional digital sovereignty.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today, navigating through an incredibly complex geopolitical and technical landscape. We started with the sheer shock and awe of March 30th, the Chronus Mafia simultaneously dropping 8 million records from the most critical sectors of the Argentine government, exposing the structural rot at the core of the state's digital perimeter.
We examined the bizarre, split-screen reality of the global reaction. The global media turning a blind eye due to epistemic injustice and geographic bias, treating Latin America as a mere testing ground, while the local networks erupted in absolute chaos.
We analyzed the Argentine government's fatal decision to enforce an institutional blackout, choosing the institutional normalcy bias of protecting their political image rather than informing their citizens. This cowardice created a massive vacuum of truth.
And we saw how that vacuum was instantly filled by saccadent social audio intelligence. The threat actors bypassed every traditional media channel, walked right onto a live public stage hosted by Alberto Daniel Hill, and delivered a 10-minute confession that exposed the state's complete incompetence.
Ultimately, the Chronus Mafia's mega leak proved that the digital perimeter as we know it is completely gone. Cyberpopulism has replaced quiet extortion. The attackers want you to see the vulnerabilities. They want the public spectacle of the state's humiliation.
So why does all of this matter to you, the listener? Why should you care about a massive data leak in Argentina or a hacker confessing on an X space? Because there's a broader concept here that applies directly to every single one of us, no matter where we live. The Schengen illusion of the internet.
I love this concept. Let's break it down. The Schengen Agreement in Europe was a treaty that removed physical border walls and passport checks between member countries, making travel incredibly easy and seamless. But removing the physical borders didn't remove the strict international laws governing things like trafficking or contraband.
Right.
However, people developed a dangerous normalcy bias. They assumed that because they couldn't physically see the borders anymore, the borders and the dangers associated with crossing them no longer existed.
And we do the exact same thing with our digital lives every single day.
We absolutely do. Just because you don't physically see the borders of your data, just because your private health records, your banking details, your text messages, and your social security number sit invisibly in the cloud, doesn't mean those borders aren't being violently crossed.
Very true.
As LSEX confessed live on air, it only took them 5 to 10 minutes to bypass a nation's entire security apparatus. 5 to 10 minutes to take everything. And while they were doing it, the government was likely already drafting their identical, vague denial statements.
The geography of the attack might be in Latin America today, but the architectural vulnerabilities, the reliance on legacy systems, and the staggering institutional hubris are global. The incubation of these massive state-level threats in the global south is just the testing ground. The malware that took down Argentina today is being refined to target the institutions you rely on tomorrow.
Exactly. The invisible digital vaults holding your entire life are only as secure as the people guarding them. And if those guards refuse to admit when the locks are broken, if they would rather turn off the security monitors than call for help, you are entirely on your own.
Which leaves us with a truly chilling reality to confront as we navigate this new era of cyberpopulism.
It does. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over. If a sovereign nation's critical infrastructure, its banks, its Supreme Court, its hospitals, can completely fall in less time than it takes you to brew a cup of coffee, and the state's only defense mechanism is to turn off the lights and pretend it didn't happen, who is actually governing our digital lives? Is it the elected officials hiding nervously behind their vague press releases? Or is it the syndicates holding the microphone in a live audio room holding all of your data, telling you that they have already won?